Welcome back. So, we are going to continue our journey into the wonders of processing. I am Freddy Veggie. I am your host and a special kind of vegetable. And I am reporting from the voyage, from the road of my own ascension, back to you lowly folks who have no idea. I don't claim to have all the ideas, but at least I gained some understanding, which I'm sharing with you. And obviously, I'm not a professional mixing engineer and professional artist and whatnot and blah blah blah, all the disclaimers. But still, I have a brain. I've done some research. I have developed an understanding of things, and this is the basis on which I am, oh my god, teaching. That's it. Alright. So, during the last video, I actually realized I made a mistake. As usual, when you're actually beginning to teach, you are making mistakes. So this time I come prepared. I even jotted down some notes. This is gonna go horribly, but it doesn't matter. So, the first mistake that I did, and the big difference that you can see here in my mixer is I have actually muted a couple of tracks, and for good reason. These things do help in making the various frequencies audible, and yeah, we don't want that at this moment, because actually we want to have the naked truth, nothing but the truth. So we're only gonna look at this track here in isolation, this beautiful orange track. And I've actually set up a nicer loop this time, so we have something that loops well, and which we shouldn't get too tired of listening to, and which has a nice transition from the end of the loop to the beginning of the loop. So, alright. To my bullet points. We are going to continue talking about equalizing, because I just started with the topic last time, and I thought I want to continue with that before we actually go to the various steps that I go through when processing a recording. And I will cover looking at the quality of a recording, looking at potential problems, looking at the dynamic range and whether a recording needs compression, and what sorts of compression are necessary, what sorts of compression are maybe fun to do, and the various parallel processing that you could see on the cyanide tracks. We will go into all of that, but one of the main tools that we do use, and that we easily understand how to use, even though we're using them wrong most of the time, are equalizers. And maybe that's because we have them on all the hi-fi stereos that people of my age do remember. Maybe a couple of the guys who are listening to that wonder, what the hell is a hi-fi stereo? What? I have this little mono box here with which I can listen to Spotify or whatever the hype thing is. Well, let me talk a little bit about equalizers. So it's funny because we know them as equalizers, but they're not only known as equalizers. Sometimes they're also known as filters, and especially on a mixing board, you might actually refer to them as the filter section of the input stage. And well, both of them are sort of correct and sort of wrong, and both of them come with point of view. The equalizer, as you can hear from the name, it's trying to make things equal in some sense. So what is the level of equality that we're trying to achieve? Well, it's all about balance. So the equalizer in its native form tries to give you a tool to achieve a tonal balance in your recordings. And this might be to balance single instruments versus the rest of the instruments. Say you have something very dark sounding and a lot of bright instruments. So with an equalizer, you can take the dark sounding instrument and make it brighter, or maybe the other way around. You're taking the bright sounding instruments and you're making them a little bit darker. Where there's equality, you can also introduce inequality. So if you have a lot of instruments which are sounding alike and which are panned in the same position, so if you close your eyes and you're listening to it on a set of big speakers and you're trying to localize the instruments, they're sort of all in the same spot. Now, these are making a big mess, and that's where an equalizer can come in once more. So by introducing inequality, you can create differences which you can then hear. Say by making an instrument brighter than another and darker than another, you can create an inequality which makes you help create separation, and then the listener to recognize this separation and hear multiple instruments at once in the same spot. At the same time, the name filter isn't wrong, because, well, actually these are filter sections, and you can filter out or select a range of frequencies, and with this range of frequencies you can toy around and introduce more gain or reduce the gain, making things louder or more silent. And the idea of a filter isn't too far away as well. If you're thinking about removing unwanted frequency content. Equalizers and filters can have tendencies to introduce their own problems. Most of the time, the biggest problem is they have a lot of knobs and they invite you to toy around with them and especially turn up a lot of frequencies, and then everything is louder and sounds better, and yeah. We're going to return to that in just a moment. So, some of the problems they can introduce are phase issues. You might read about or hear about equalizers which are linear phase, or those that have zero latency, especially in the digital realm. So latency is an issue. That is, if you have a knob and you turn the knob, you want to hear immediately what it's doing. And in digital signal processing, trying to achieve that comes with its own set of problems. And one of those are often phase issues. And phase issues occur when the equalized signal is canceling out part of the original signal. So on top of the equalization that you've just added, maybe you are also changing the tonal balance, which you maybe don't want. But this is something that we will revisit a little bit later on. Just keep in mind that digital equalizers can come with their own set of problems. And if you have a choice to use something with zero latency and maybe some latency we can live with. If you're looking at the re-EQ here, which this time I will hopefully remember to put a link in the description. Down here in the settings you have two modes: fastest no latency, accurate latency. Well, let's go to high quality, shan't we? Okay, equalizers. My next bullet point. Don't overdo it and be bold. Wait a moment. I should not overdo it, but at the same time be bold? Exactly, that's just right. Equalization is a creative process. You're using a tool to achieve a sound that you have in mind for instruments or whole arrangements. So do be bold. If you can turn a knob and achieve the sound that you want to have, even if you're making an unnatural representation of the instrument, well, that's your creative choice, and please be my guest, do it. If you think that it sounds better, please go ahead and do it. That's the one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is don't overdo it. Try to remain as close to the natural original source as you can be. Well, maybe it's not your creative vision, then of course don't do it, but just cranking up all sorts of frequencies for the heck of it is not going to be a good idea. So let me just reduce the volume a little bit here and toy around a little bit with the sound. So say for example, I really like this to have more bottom end. So some people will tell you, only do a slight boost. Well, maybe I don't want a slight boost. Maybe I want a really big and bad low end. Crank it up like 12-15 dB. Oh yeah, that's badass, right? Or maybe it sounds shit. So this is with the band bypassed. This is with it in. You can hear it's changing the tonal balance of the whole instrument. And maybe that's what I'm going for. And I can't achieve this with just a little tiny boost. It's not gonna shift the whole instrument. I would have to introduce another filter up here, which, let's make this a high shelf and cut here. This may sound the same, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I like this version better, you know. There's no real wrong here. I'm just saying don't blindly go ahead and turn some knobs because there's a lot of knobs that you can turn. That's all I'm saying. Do deliberate moves with the equalization. You should have an idea of what you want to achieve, what is your perception of what is wrong with sound source, and you should have like an idea where to go with an equalizer to fix it. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is psychoacoustic effects. Last time I was going through the whole frequency spectrum and I did a sweep by using a bandpass filter with a high Q, something like this. And let's do this again, a little bit wider. I want you to pay attention to how high your perception is of the frequency content that is in the spotlight. And I'm going to start with something really low and go up to the higher end. And especially when we're coming close to maybe around about this area, let me put a little marker here. I'm going to go all the way up to the higher register and back down again. And I want you to listen to what is happening when I'm in this area versus when I've passed the 2 here and I'm coming back to the middle. And something surprising is going to happen. I guess you will say that. Let's find out. So did it work for you? There's only one way to find out. The thing that I'm talking about is when I'm coming down from here, we're entering the range where the human hearing has a lot of focus in the area between, say, maybe 2.5K and down to 100 Hertz, maybe. That is because in this range here, in this area here, there's the human voice, and everything that is important in our lives is essentially happening in this area of sound here. So something like this. This is the all-important human range of hearing. And when you're entering this from the top, and we're coming from really high frequencies, right? But it sounds like we're starting, like this is bass content and all the didgeridoo, and then suddenly it's coming in there like really high and bright and going down to the lower register, even though we're coming from way higher frequencies, so that doesn't really make sense. But that's one of the psychoacoustic effects. Like this is sounding bassy, but with air. And this is sounding bright. And with a singing voice, like this is bright content here, right? And then it's getting dark. But this up here is essentially also dark. So there's something interesting going on here. And this has to do with the overtones, with the multiples of the frequencies, and with our brain, which essentially is used to hearing overtones of tones that the focus is not there. So for instance, if I have a frequency content at, say, 25 Hertz, and I have the first overtone at 50, and then at 75, and then at 100, and so on and so on. And I'm hearing like the 10th overtone of that. So like 250 Hertz, 275 Hertz. The brain will be able to synthesize that there's also information at 25 Hertz. And this is something that the loudness knobs on the good old stereos have used, and this is also something that most of the mobile phones are doing to give you the illusion that they can reproduce bass sounds. Most of the mobile phone speakers aren't physically capable of even reproducing like 150 or 100 Hertz, 80 Hertz. It's impossible. What they're doing is they're playing you the overtone of the bass frequency so that your brain will think that it's there. And with an equalizer, you can actually use that effect. You can crank up the higher frequencies to give a listener the impression of having more bass. It's freaky like that. And there's also another thing. Let me just play this again. Because you will... When you're working with an equalizer, you have to pay attention to one very dangerous thing, and that is we get used to hearing something in a certain way very quickly. And I haven't moved the filter here on purpose, because I want you to get used to this strange sound. And when you listen to it like that, that's how it's supposed to sound. Well, fasten your seatbelts. That's how it's supposed to sound. And the same thing can happen when you're playing around with boosts. So let me just crank down the volume here a little bit and choose a different filter band. You might actually boost something which is very ugly. Let me find something ugly. But when you listen to it for a while, this will become your new normal, and you will no longer realize that this is there. Now maybe with one band it's not so bad, but all sorts of weird stuff, and at some point you will just no longer notice how you're manipulating the sound, because this will be your normal. So there's two things that you can do here. The first is bypass bands. So for instance, this guy here, turn it off. Even better, you can easily do this with this specific equalizer. You can invert the gain. So you can make a cut out of a boost and vice versa. And what this does is it refreshes your ear. So for instance, if you're going around boosting, scanning for a frequency, right, you're going through the whole spectrum and you think, this is something that I might want to work on, then the first thing that you should do is take a gain knob and cut, and give your brain time to adapt to that sound, and then you boost. Speaking of cutting and boosting, generally there's multiple options to achieve the same thing. For instance, say you want to have more bass, and you see two curves in here. Let me just get rid of the third one. So there's actually two curves in here. Both of these curves achieve the same end. This one boosts the bass, and the overall balance, tonal balance, will shift towards the bass. The blue curve over here will cut the highs, but because we're cutting highs, what we're essentially doing is we're pushing the bass up in the tonal balance. So there's usually two ways to achieve the same end, and there's no good single rule which is the better way. Just one thing that you can keep in mind is if you're boosting something, you're making it louder. If you're cutting, you're making it more silent. Both can be the right answer depending on the context. So let me just engage the loop again here, and like this is hardcore bass, right? This is round about the same muffled sound. And I also want to introduce you to a little nice tool which you can, JSFX, which I will also link down in the description. And let me enable these guys. What they're doing is they're making sure that you are not hearing a level difference with an effect in and out. And this enables you to just listen to what the effect is doing and not be confused by the level difference. So you can see here the post gain dB is the same coming in and out. Now if I enable this band here, see that there's a lot of energy going through here, and I can just click this button here to listen to before the effect and behind the effect. But what this is doing is it's making it more silent so that I'm not confused by the increase in level. Now what it's doing, it's actually increasing the level. By using tools like these, you can make your life a little bit easier because you're only listening to what an equalization is doing and not get fooled by a level difference. So, I have two more hints to give out, and then I guess that's it for this video before we come back and actually do some work. So, to round off the topic of equalization, here's two things to do. First, even if it's nice to have a spectrum analyzer and to see what here we go, to see what the equalization is doing. Yeah, I'm cutting here and I'm boosting there, and nice, I can see how the curves are changing. Well, don't do that. Please use equalization by ear, not by eye. We don't use the eyes to perceive sound. It sounds pretty obvious when I say it like that, but you can be fooled to think about, yeah, here's the fundamental, I can see it and I want more fundamental, and oh, that looks nice, but I don't like this spike, and let's get rid of that. And you can be fooled to make moves on the equalizer which are dictated by your visual and not by your oral stimulus. And then you mix the song and upload it somewhere, share it with somebody else, and they don't use their eyes to listen to the song, they use their ears naturally. And what they might hear is maybe not what you expect, because you didn't use your ears to sculpt the sound. Please use your ears. And the second advice is you can actually train your perception of which frequencies are interesting and which frequencies might need treatment. And this is by telling yourself when you think you know where a problem is or where you want to make a move. Like, for instance, I think we could use a couple of dBs of boost at around about 2K, maybe 1.9K, so that we can hear the pre-compression attack better, like the tuff, tuff. So let me just add that. And you tell yourself why you're making a move, and you speak it out loud. Why you're making a move and what are the parameters of the move. So little round about 2K, okay, with a little wider curve, and let's say 3.5 dB. Yeah, something like that. I'll let you be the judge of that. Did that help? I think it helped a little bit. So here's how the game goes. You identify a problem, you state to the world and the universe in particular, I'm gonna fix this problem by cutting 3.5 dB of 60 Hertz. And then you go ahead and do it. And then you A/B your work. And then you tell yourself, well, this was great. 60 Hertz was the right frequency, but I actually had to cut 5 dB. Or you tell yourself, well, maybe no. I shouldn't have cut at 60 Hertz, I should have cut at 80 Hertz. Or maybe I should have boosted at 3K. And by telling yourself that, you are actually building up a corpus of experience and get to know your frequencies better. Alright, so that's my rambling about equalization, filters, and what to look out for. The next time we will actually return to filtering and talk about the different tools that equalizers usually are offering. And this is a pretty nice tool because it offers essentially everything that one can find on any sort of equalizer. So we can look and listen to that, look at that and listen to it. So we can check these out and see what the effects are and how you can use them, especially with hardware, with analog equalizers. You often only have very few bands, and it becomes very interesting to know how to use them, to combine them, to get specific shapes of curves out of the analog equalizers, which can be helpful when you're doing live work, of course. Yeah, so that's probably going to be the next episode, and then we are going to look at the dry recording that I did. Start and try to identify problems with it, see how we can fix those, and see how we can get this into a shape so that we can actually process it. All right. This has been Freddy Veggie's Voyage, Kafka-The Process, part 2 of 133 easy steps of processing your didgeridoo sounds. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, leave a comment, do subscribe if you haven't. All this nice YouTube shill stuff. And let's see if we can make some nice sound out of that. Although I think this sounds great already. Doesn't it? Come on. Yeah. With that being said, see you around.